Swamiji for his cordial invitation. In fact, we have a long-standing social ties. He has been to Malaysia several times, and indeed, yeah, indeed glad to see you again after. And also, I'd like to extend to all the speakers for their wonderful ideas, and finally to all the peace-loving and patient audience for your long-standing. You can wait until this. In Malaysia, if you hold conference until evening, you won't have any audience, but here at least you have audience. Okay, let me just go straight to our topic here. Basically, I'm taking a different perspective. Of course, some of you all have touched on history as a factor in peace. So I'm trying to draw on the Malaysian experience of how, by looking at history, written history, how it can bring about peace. As you know, in all countries, even in America itself, history is always distorted. And Malaysia is also not out of that. And we are also experiencing a lot of distortion in history. I call it here bias in history. So there is this is the theme that I'm trying to share with you guys. We have seen how colonial history has its own distortion, its own ignorance of the experience in the East. There's a lot of false history. There's a lot of fake history, now we call it. And all this has led to revision of history. So during this post-colonial era, we have seen attempts to revise history by post-colonial societies, the independent societies. They attempt to revise national history. But the problem is, even the national history is also distorted. So there is two layers of distortion. First, you have the colonial history that is biased and distorted. Now you have national history based on certain interest group, or you call it the history of the majority, is also distorted. So you have two layers of distortion. And this is what I want to share with you guys on the contesting bias in the nationalist narrative. In Malaysia, we have this dominance of this nationalist, so-called nationalist, meaning the majority. So they have certain constructs of history. So in the process of trying to revise the colonial history, we have this nationalist agenda in place. And as a consequence, we witnessed it. By way of content of my presentation, I'll just give a brief background of this, an introduction, the context in which I come from. Secondly, I'll talk about the problem. And then thirdly, I will be highlighting, this is the main part of my paper, is contesting the nationalist narratives. And finally, a conclusion. By way of background, I will touch on the context. Actually, we are doing a a Malaysian project. We are doing a Malaysian project on this revisionist history. We are trying to not only look at the colonial history, but also we are trying to examine the current national history. What is happening right now in Malaysia is there is overzealousness on the part of the majority group to rewrite history to the extent that the claims are, I would say, overclaimed to the extent that it's unimaginable, and history books are being rewritten with many false claims without adequate evidence, or even attempting to use academia in the process of legitimizing some of this. So this is the extent. So my partner, Mr. Callistus, my co-writer here, we are embarking on this Malaysian project to contest this national narrative that's going on, and the worst part is it involves academics too. So that is the sad part of. Then we'll talk about the relationship afterwards. So this is the Malaysian project, a revisionist history for an inclusive social reality. We feel that the revisionist history that is currently going on based on the nationalist narrative is too exclusivist. It's only telling one part of the story. And we have heard from our previous deliberation yesterday and today, we have heard about this idea of truth. What is the truth? And yesterday we heard one speaker talk about the need to listen to different perspectives, to different approaches as well. So this is the approach that we are taking in this national project. So what I'm going to share, this context here, is just one small part of that exercise. We're just looking at this relationship between history, how a real history, a true history, an inclusive history can bring about justice, fairness. If history lies, it has implication to justice. And lack of justice can bring about divisiveness, lack of cohesion. And lack of cohesion can bring about our theme on peace. And we have heard about many speakers talk about the inner peace, the idea of, the Indian tradition talks about the inner peace, how to bring about happiness inside. If outside you are not happy, how to bring happiness inside? First we have to address the external. Of course, in order to bring a proper history, you have to serve the true history first. If we don't serve the right history, we don't serve the real history, how to bring about justice and how to bring about peace. I think that is the premise of the relationship that we like to deliberate on. And so here we are talking about the context of colonial history, just now mentioned briefly. Right now we are revising our national history, which is also skewed, which is also biased, which is also indulging in lots of false narrative without adequate and substantive. So this is the problem we are facing, and I would like to share some of the discrepancies in our history. So the problem that we would like to look at this here is about what the nationalists are doing is, in the name of rewriting history, they have brought in local scholars who are distorting history, and they are also making all kinds of false and unvalidated claims and overzealous claims. For example, there is talk about shipbuilding. I mean, we have the Malay natives have this capability to, they have the tech to sail from east to west and west to east up to Madagascar. Claims without adequate facts. If you say you have a technology to sail from one corner to the other, you must have knowledge system. These are basic things. But without adequate, they're making wild claims. I'm just giving one example just to illustrate. And it is all based on agenda-driven, based on interest. And these findings are now being contested, and we are part of this. We are embarking on this contestation. So we should not blame the colonials. We should also blame ourselves. So probably that is a self-reflection. So not only we have to serve history well, through history, but we have to serve by writing the right history. We are serving history, and in the process we are also reflecting the true history. So the consequences of this So as a consequences of rewriting this mainstream false narrative, which appears to assert the Malay agenda, which is the majority agenda, the minority history are suppressed. This is what's happening. I'm sure you guys can attest to that. I'm sure you all experienced that. The minority history, the word history itself is a majority history. Her history is missing. Only his history is there. His story is there. Her story is missing. So similarly, in all mainstream societies, the minority history is suppressed and sometimes denied and sometimes erased in Malaysia. Of course, you can reflect in your own experience because you have so many regional experiences, south and north, and then you have regional differences. I'm sure you can relate to that. Minorities' contributions are belittled. This is another part of history. I'm sure you can reflect on this. Minorities' contributions are, and by implication, minority rights, dignity are trampled. This is prevalent. In fact, by asserting certain certain narrative, you assert certain rights, and you deny. And finally, what I'm trying to say is, the consequences, it has the potential for cultural genocide, although we are not at that stage. But all this rewriting fake history or biased history has the potential to lead to cultural genocide. I think history can attest to that. So that is the problem that we like to address. So this is where the need, based on this problem, and we know the consequences, there is a need for contesting these narratives to correct the wrongs, to tell the history as it is. That is our project all about. And how the minorities' histories are distorted, and how it has social implications in terms of policy, in terms of it has enduring effect. And the minorities need to buckle up. You don't have to be fearful. You have to tell the story as it is. You don't have to be fearful. Because I'm retired now, so I don't have to be fearful, Mr. Sarada. So here I'm just going to share 3 points on the. There are many other issues, but I'm just highlighting 3 points. How this contesting nationalist history, and this is what we are embarking on. First is the debunking of the Malay land. This is one of the main things that is taking place in Malaysia. How we attempt to debunk this idea of Malay land. And this is the concept of Tanah Melayu or Malay land as a unified territory for Malay. It's actually a complex one. But this idea has been propagated, and in fact it is also a colonial construct. We argue that it is a colonial construct. Of course, the nationalists, we believe that based on our interrogation of early texts from Indonesia as well as Indian sources, we like to debunk this idea of there's no such thing as Malay land. In the first place, we are contesting the word Malay itself, we are contesting. So our project is embarking on that trajectory. Why? Because Malay, what this Malay land project they are telling is, they have a very short-term view of history. They just take the post 1400 onwards, and the word Malay itself is contested. It's not. It's actually a colonial construct. How the colonials, they bring in the idea of race. The Europeans, they brought in the idea of race and they categorized Malay. But Malay is much more complex than that. It is not a unified shared identity. If you go to Indonesia, the word Malay is limited, but in Malaysia it's all encompassing. So they use this kind of constructs to legitimize. So we are contesting that colonial construct based on historical evidence. Of course, we are not just because the current argument is just based on Malay Sultanate. In fact, there is no such thing as Malay Sultanate. We are taking one step further, because what we have is Malacca Sultanate, we have Aceh Sultanate, we have various sultanate. It's more like a city-state. But the construct, the British legitimized these various sultanate as Malay Sultanate. So we are contesting this idea of Malay as a broad. Malay is not that broad. If you go to Indonesia, it's just one category. In Malaysia, the Bugis become Malay, the Javanese become Malay, the Mandaling become Malay, the Acehnese become Malay. These are all constructs. So we are contesting this idea of Malay land. Of course, it's enshrined in our constitution, but as an academic, we have to tell the truth. We have to be real. Then what's the purpose of being academic? Why are we following? The colonial use their lens, their racial lens. When they come to this part of the world, they see all these people talk certain language. Okay, these people are Malay. They legitimize. They wrote the history. So similar to what you guys are doing, probably you are saying you are not India, you are Bharat. I'm saying we are not Malaysia. Maybe we have to come up with a different name. In fact, we are contesting the word Malay itself. Is Malay a race as what the British construct, or is it a location? We are saying Malay is a geographical reference, nothing to do with race. Just like you guys, you say India, there's no such thing as India. It's just a name given by the Parsis on something like that. I mean, but if you look at Malay, it was a reference to a location. Melayu originally it was specific location to a river in Sumatra. Now we call it Jambi. That is where the people, and this there is a reference. Kartagama, 1365. That's the oldest text available in Southeast Asia, in Java. They have reference to that, the people from that area. And also there are reference to people from Malay Kingdom in reference to Jambi. Nothing to do with Malaya. These are all constructs. And there are Chinese sources talking about reference to Jambi as the hill people. Kunlun as reference to that part of the area. And there are of course Tamil sources referring to Malayur. And it's reference to Sumatra, not Malaya, the peninsula. So the claim about Malay land as belonging to the Malay race is false. That's what we are. It's quite, if I were to say this in Malaysia, probably I'm behind bars, huh? No. Huh? But we have sources based on the Javanese sources. They talk about reference to Malay specifically. They didn't refer. But the problem is the British as well as our local, they assume that Malay as all-encompassing. There is a concept called rantau or sojourners. People move around. There is a concept of regional mobility as people, as Malays. But sojourners, if you want to say sojourners are Malay, so the Chinese are also moved. The Chinese can construct the South China Sea as theirs because they move around. Indians can claim they have been moving around Southeast Asia. They have epigraphs, proof of epigraph. They have names for Borneo Island. They have names. They can claim Southeast Asia as theirs. So everyone can claim. Mobility doesn't give you the right to claim any area as. So this is also we are contesting. And finally, I think the last slide, I don't want to take too much, just to give you illustration of the types of contestation that we are doing. So the idea of a pan-Malay identity has developed over time with the support of British, of course, because the language, the lingua franca, this is another contestation. The language itself is contested. Because if you look at the old Malay is from the Pallava script. Yesterday, there's a madam from Miss, what's her name? Chitra. Miss Chitra, she was talking about Pallava. Actually, the old Malay is Pallava script. But because the British are ignorant of the type of language that is used, they assume when they look at Champa, when they look at Java, when they look at Vietnam, there is a lot of Sanskrit and languages being used. So they assume all these are Malay. The old Malay, actually the core of it, the core loan words are actually Sanskrit. Only the script is Pallava script. But they assume that as Malay. That legitimized the lingua franca of Malay became a lingua franca. Actually, it's not a lingua franca. We are contesting that based on two two accounts. One is the Pigafetta list by the Italian. They have a Pigafetta list, and then there is a Chinese loan words, and we are contesting the validity of lingua franca. We are saying why we are contesting, because one of the leading Malay literary scholar, Munshi Abdullah, who happens to be a Tamil mixed with some Arabic blood, but always they diffuse the Tamil and they claim he's a Muslim. This is a tendency in our parts of the world. So what these Arab scholars, this so-called Malay literary scholar says, he himself says, if you want to trade, you must learn the language of Tamil. How can a Malay scholar, a Malay literary 17th century scholar says, if you want to trade, you must learn Tamil, but all these history books are telling lingua franca of Southeast Asia is Malay. There's an irony to this. So to me, I see this is, so there's a lot of contestation, but just let me summarize here. I'm just illustrating. There is another overzealous claim just now. Sorry. They are claiming Malay world, just like what the Chinese saying. The Southeast China Sea is their part of the world. We are also claiming the whole archipelago, Southeast Asia, is part of Malay world. It's already in the textbook. It's already in our narrative, national narrative. So we are contesting this because, to me, you have Javanese who have a longer tradition. Just because of that legitimation of the lingua franca, they are claiming the whole up to Madagascar. From Madagascar right up to Timor is the Malay world. To me, this is getting overboard. I mean, I think as an academic, we have to, and we have another term, Nusantara. This is also a regional. It's written in the 14th century text, but it only refers to a specific Majapahit Empire. But we have expanded that. We use this Javanese text. So what's happening in our national narrative is we use this mirror effect. We embrace whichever civilization that has this knowledge system. We hijack them and call it ourselves, and then we expand on that. This is what's happening in our historical rewriting. Just to summarize this point. So what we are claiming is there is no evidence in pre-colonial text to validate the Malay claim. So by way of conclusion, what are we trying to say is by contesting this biasness in the nationalist narratives, we hope to work towards this real historical narrative, and Malaysia can develop a just understanding which can be an effective catalyst for unity and peace. And we hope an inclusive history will acknowledge the contributions of other society and eventually will foster social cohesion and unity. Thank you very much.